Eugenio was a first-year university student who worked as a janitor at the school. His parents weren't wealthy, so he was accustomed to being self-reliant. He knew he could achieve a lot through hard work and determination. In the mornings, he tutored neighborhood kids in math, and in the evenings, he cleaned the nearby school where he had once studied. It was an unusual job for him, but he was grateful for it. He had few chances of finding a better job. Firstly, he had just turned 18. Secondly, other options, like working on a construction site or as a laborer, required him to work full-time. That would mean skipping lectures, something he didn't want to do. Education was always his top priority. He knew that if he graduated from university with honors, he could expect a good position and finally be able to escape poverty and help his parents. Eugenio believed he could do it. He just needed a bit of perseverance and patience. So, he was very grateful to the school principal who gave him the opportunity to work in the evenings. Senor remembered Eugenio well. He had always been a diligent, polite, and well-managed student, so he felt it was his duty to help him. Every evening, Eugenio cleaned the floors in the classrooms and corridors, took out the trash, wiped the desks, watered the flowers. Basically, he did everything to make the school clean and tidy and ready for the next encounter with the noisy horde of students. Eugenio was used to cleaning in complete silence and solitude and didn't even suspect that something unusual would happen to him on the empty school grounds one day. It happened on a Friday evening when the other students had gone home as usual. Eugenio didn't notice her at first. She was sitting huddled behind the trash cans, trembling with tears. Eugenio had just stepped out to throw away the garbage when he heard strange sounds. For a while, he couldn't understand where they were coming from. At first, he thought it was a kitten mewing somewhere. He looked around for the animal and then noticed the tangled wavy ash-colored hair. So, it's not a kitten, he thought in amazement. The unknown creature sniffled, shuffled noisily, and the young man realized it was a girl. "Hey, what are you doing here?" Eugenio asked. The girl sniffled again and silently stood up. She looked about 13 or 14. Her eyes were teary, her shirt and face were dirty, her skirt torn. One sock had slipped down, revealing a long scratch. The girl angrily rubbed her nose and squinted, trying to find something on the ground. "What happened to you?" Eugenio asked. He didn't want to scare the girl, so he tried to make his voice as gentle as possible. The girl shifted from foot to foot and remained silent, still not looking up from the ground. "Did someone hurt you?" The girl frowned, as if remembering something. "They always bully and tease me. They say I'm from the moon," she finally croaked, still not lifting her gaze. "Did you lose something?" Eugenio asked, also looking down. "My glasses," the girl confessed. "I hope they're okay." "Did you get into a fight with those bullies?" Eugenio asked, concerned. "They were calling me names," the girl replied shortly. They spent some time silently searching for the glasses. Finally, Eugenio noticed them. The glasses were lying some distance away from the trash cans, dirty but intact. "You're lucky," Eugenio said cheerfully, wiping the glasses with a cloth and returning them to the girl. "Thank you," she replied, putting on the glasses, but still not looking at the young man. "Try not to lose them again," he patronizingly advised. "And it's better not to get into fights." The girl just nodded. Now she was carefully examining the scratch on her knee and the torn hem of her skirt. Possibly afraid of getting scolded by her mother, Eugenio thought with pity. "Listen, what's your name?" he unexpectedly asked. The girl finally looked up at him for the first time. She had beautiful gray eyes. Eugenio was even taken aback, they were so deep. "Katrina," his new acquaintance replied. Now she was scrutinizing Eugenio's face attentively. Apparently, it was unusual for her that someone was interested in her. "What were you doing here in the backyard anyway?" "Hiding and writing stories," the girl replied. She pulled out a worn spiral notebook from her pocket, in which a stub of a simple pencil was inserted. "You write stories?" Eugenio exclaimed. Katrina nodded. Stories, fairy tales, and even horror stories, she admitted. And your classmates clearly don't like that? Eugenio guessed. They think I'm strange, Katrina replied in a matter-of-fact tone. They found me and wanted to take my notebook to laugh at what I write. As the girl spoke, her stomach suddenly growled loudly, and she shamefully covered it with her hand. Are you hungry? Eugenio asked, concerned, and when Katrina nodded, he added, let's go inside, I have a cheese sandwich and some milk with me. The girl obediently followed the young man. When he handed her the sandwich, she eagerly started eating it. It seems like she hasn't had enough, Eugenio thought, sympathetically watching the girl. He himself came from a poor family, but he had never had to go hungry. His mom always knew how to cook something delicious, even if she only had the simplest ingredients. Katrina finished the milk and thanked Eugenio with a smile. It was evident that her mood had significantly improved. I'll write a story about you, she promised. In it, you'll be an elf with kind eyes. With these words, she ran off. Eugenio shrugged and went to throw away the paper bag his mother had wrapped his sandwich in. Exiting the school building, he immediately forgot about the strange girl. However, the following week, when he came to clean, he saw her sitting on the windowsill on the ground floor. I've been waiting for you, the girl said timidly, looking trustingly at him with her big gray eyes. Eugene smiled at her, and Katrina, emboldened, handed him rolled-up sheets of paper. What's this? The guy asked. It's a story about you, Katrina replied, looking into his eyes again. So, about the elf with kind eyes? The young man clarified with a laugh. Exactly, the girl nodded. In this story, you, I mean the elf, save a beautiful enchanted fairy and give her a magical nourishing elixir, with which she regains her magical power. Wow, that's interesting, Eugenio exclaimed sincerely. And the fairy, if I understand correctly, is you. Katrina smiled shyly, tilting her head slightly. I'll definitely read your story. Thank you for trusting me, Eugenio said. The girl, squinting slightly, stared at him through her glasses, assessing whether he was making fun of her. When she realized that the guy was speaking from the heart, the girl straightened her shoulders, and Katrina smiled. You have a very nice smile, Eugenio remarked. His words again embarrassed the girl, and a blush spread across her cheeks. Would you like a sandwich? Today it's avocado, he offered. The girl eagerly nodded. She clearly had a good appetite. The guy handed her the paper bag with food and, saying that it was time for him to work, left. Katrina watched him leave for a long time. From that day on, the girl almost every day waited for Eugenio on the same windowsill. When he arrived, they exchanged a few words about her stories, and the guy invariably treated the girl to something tasty. Sometimes they stayed at school until late. They sat at a desk in one of the classrooms and read something together or studied Italian, which Eugenio loved. He noticed that Katrina was interested in everything, and the guy tried to tell her something new every time, something he had learned at lectures. You definitely need to go to university when you finish school. You grasp things quickly, you have a great memory. You deserve more than to languish in poor neighborhoods and a low-paying job. But I just want to write stories, Katrina objected. All I need for that is my imagination. Not only that, Eugenio disagreed with her. Good writers know a lot. The more you learn, the deeper your works will become. Upon hearing this, Katrina pondered for a long time. Do you think I can do it? She asked doubtfully, tracing her finger along the smooth surface of the desk. Getting into and graduating from university is no joke. Of course, Eugenio replied confidently. You can do anything you set your mind to. The girl lifted her chin, looked at the young man, and smiled. Eventually, Eugenio became so accustomed to Katrina that he couldn't imagine his life without her anymore. He noticed that every time she eagerly awaited him and listened attentively to every word he said. Eugenio realized that the girl had grown very attached to him. This scared him a little because he knew their friendship couldn't last forever. During the school holidays, he planned to find a new job to be able to afford extra courses. Katrina seemed to feel the same way. On the last day of school before the holidays, she was very sad. Eugenio felt like she was on the verge of tears. That evening, he brought her a big slice of chocolate cake that his mother had baked for his father's birthday. Katrina eagerly attacked the treat. This time, they were sitting at one of the desks in the biology class, and Eugenio smiled as he watched the girl devour the cake. He was pleased that he could make his little friend happy. How easy it is to make someone a little happier, he thought. Katrina swallowed the last bite and washed it down with cocoa from the thermos. "Your mom cooks so deliciously," the girl confessed. Eugene nodded. "Indeed, she's a real master." He smiled in response. "The holidays start tomorrow," Katrina said and looked Eugenio in the eyes. "But I'll still come to school to meet you." However, the guy shook his head. "I won't be here, Katrina," he gently replied. The girl looked at him bewilderedly. "But, how?" "I won't be working at the school anymore," Eugenio admitted. "I found another job in the city center. I'm moving to a dormitory closer to the university next week." Katrina sadly lowered her gaze. "But, will we still see each other?" Eugenio felt his heart tighten, but he knew he shouldn't give the girl false hope. "Unfortunately, that's not possible. I'll be living in the city, and I won't be able to come here often. But you can come to our house for dinner. Mom and Dad would be happy to see you." "Yes, but I can come to you myself," Katrina objected. "I know how. I just need to take the tram and—" "I'm sorry, Katrina," the guy interrupted her. "You see, I won't have time to see you. I'll need to work a lot, attend lectures, and take extra courses. I'm really sorry." Katrina looked sadly at Eugenio. "So, you're leaving me? But we're friends, right?" she said, barely holding back tears. "And I love you," Katrina added softly. These words hit Eugenio like thunder. He felt that he meant a lot to Katrina, but he never thought she loved him. "You're the only one who really believed in me," the girl said, pleadingly looking into the young man's eyes. "And you? Do you love me?" Eugene didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry, Katrina," he whispered. "But you're still young." "I'll be 15 in 3 months," exclaimed the girl. "Yes, but still. You're so young. Now is not the time to think about love. You have your whole life ahead of you. You need to study, write stories, attend meetings with young authors. The whole world is open to you." Katrina listened to Eugenio, and her face expressed a whole range of different emotions. Hope was replaced by pain and disappointment, then fear and sadness appeared on it. The young man's heart clenched again, but he couldn't do anything about it. "Please forgive me," he simply repeated. Tears welled up in Katrina's eyes. She jumped up from behind the desk and ran out of the classroom. Eugene never saw her again. The next day, he packed his things and left for the city, moving into a dormitory. His life spun and twirled like a colorful Ferris wheel in an amusement park. New acquaintances, meetings, friends, lectures, courses, exams, concerts, performances, holidays, sports, trips, and travels in all this vibrant whirlwind. Eugenio only occasionally remembered the pale face of the girl with big gray eyes. It would appear in his memory for a moment, stab his heart, and then sink back into oblivion. 13 years passed. During this time, Eugenio graduated from university with honors, but he was not lucky with a good job. Despite his diploma and various certificates, he got positions that didn't allow for growth. The young man couldn't accept it, as he was used to constantly evolving and striving for more since childhood. Of course, it wasn't all bad. Eugenio could afford to rent a spacious studio apartment in the center, help his parents, and even occasionally travel. But deep down, he knew that this was far from the limit of his dreams. Finally, after much contemplation, he decided to pursue banking. Studying came easily to Eugenio because he enjoyed learning new things. He wasn't afraid of starting over. So, as soon as he passed his final exams at banking school, he immediately sent his resume to all the available vacancies he could find in the city. He was invited for an interview at one of the country's largest banks, and Eugenio was very nervous as he prepared for the meeting. He even bought a new suit and shirt that suited him very well. Everything was going well, but the day before the interview, Eugenio suddenly felt weak. He became dizzy, and his temperature rose unexpectedly. This had never happened to him before, and the man attributed it all to the nervousness he felt before the interview. He decided to go to bed early to feel rested and full of energy the next day. However, in the morning, his temperature was still quite high, although he felt quite well. Deciding not to cancel the meeting, Eugenio drank some invigorating coffee and headed to the interview. On the way, he checked several times to make sure he had all the necessary documents and a copy of his resume. Everything was in place. "I'll be fine," Eugenio reassured himself. He anxiously checked his forehead, and it seemed to him that the temperature had dropped. Entering the bank building, he approached the girl at the reception desk. She said he needed to go to the third floor, find office 95, and wait to be called in. Eugenio thanked the girl with a nod and headed to the elevators. Finding office 95 was easy. Eugenio took a deep breath and sat on the soft leather couch opposite the door. There was no one else in the corridor, which pleased him. About 5 minutes passed. Eugenio impatiently glanced at the door, wondering if he should knock, when suddenly it opened. The man instantly jumped to his feet, wanting to greet the person who was supposed to conduct the interview with him. Imagine his surprise when he saw a young, beautiful woman come out to meet him. Her strict dark suit emphasized her slender figure. Long ash-colored hair was smoothly gathered at the nape of her neck. Big gray eyes looked attentively and inquisitively. A blush played on her cheeks. "Señor Cuero," she asked, and Eugenio noticed a slight hoarseness in her voice that seemed familiar to him. And the girl herself strongly reminded him of someone whom he just couldn't remember. His head suddenly spun again for a moment, and everything seemed like a dream to him. He nodded to the young woman and extended his hand for a handshake. "How may I address you?" he asked. "Señorita Camina," the girl replied, gesturing for him to follow her. They entered a bright office, from which there was a beautiful view of the city park with fountains and cozy shady alleys. The girl indicated a chair for Eugenio to sit in, and she took a seat opposite him. The man stared at her intently, trying to remember where they might have met, but his mind was shrouded in fog. Apparently, he did have a temperature after all. For a while, the girl looked over his resume, but Eugenio got the impression that she was just staring into space. Finally, she looked up and once again gazed intently into his eyes. "Señor Cuero, may I ask you a question?" "Of course," he nodded, feeling like the objects in the room were starting to blur. He somehow forced himself to focus on the face of his interlocutor. "You." She hesitantly began, and then blurted out, "Do you remember me?" Eugene was startled. He hadn't expected to hear that. The girl asked exactly the question that had been swirling in his inflamed mind all this time. I'm sorry. I'm feeling unwell today," Eugenio admitted weakly. The girl suddenly jumped up from her seat. "It's me, Katrina. Have you completely forgotten me, Eugenio?" she said with tears in her eyes. "You treated me to chocolate cake and said I had a bright future." "Katrina," whispered Eugenio. "It's you. You've become so." But he couldn't finish the sentence. The room swam before his eyes, his head felt squeezed, and he lost consciousness. He woke up in a white hospital room. Annoying beeps came from some devices nearby. A catheter was attached to his arm. Eugenio couldn't remember at all how he ended up here. Looking around, he didn't see anyone. He noticed a call button by the headboard and pressed it. A few minutes later, a tall curly-haired guy in a hospital uniform entered the room. "Are you awake?" he asked, not waiting for Eugenio to respond, and quickly added, "I'll call your attending physician now." With these words, he hurried out of the room. A few minutes later, the door opened again, and Eugenio saw a man in his mid-40s. He wore a white coat and held a tablet with the attached medical history. "Senor Cuero, my name is Valentin Barua, and I'm your doctor." "Doctor, I don't remember how I got here. Yesterday I had a high fever, but today I felt much better." "I'm sorry, Senor Cuero, it wasn't yesterday, it was the day before yesterday," clarified the doctor. "You've been unconscious for almost a day." "A day? But what happened to me? I thought it was just exhaustion." The doctor took a chair from the wall and placed it closer to Eugenio's bed. Eugenio understood that he was about to hear something important. "It's all a bit more serious than you think, Senor Cuero. We ran some blood tests, and the results troubled me. We need to do an ultrasound and perform other procedures." "Doctor, do you think it's that serious?" "I'm sorry to upset you, Senor Cuero, but yes. You need further examination. Have there been any cases of serious illnesses in your family?" Eugenio closed his eyes, trying to remember something, but his mind was blank. He shook his head. The doctor nodded and said he needed to attend to another patient, then left the room. Eugenio was left alone again. He couldn't wrap his head around how all this could have happened to him. Just yesterday, he was gearing up for a successful job interview, and all his thoughts were consumed by interviews and resume submissions. And now, a day later, he lay in a hospital bed, not knowing what was wrong with him and how serious it all was. Judging by the doctor's eyes, he clearly wasn't joking or exaggerating the significance of the situation. Eugenio nervously sighed and ran his sweaty hands through his hair. He hoped this wouldn't drag on for long, and he could soon return home to his normal life. He closed his eyes, and suddenly, a beautiful woman appeared in his mind, the one who came to him in the bank. Katrina. It was her, Eugenio remembered. How she has changed. He returned in memory 13 years ago. The girl he remembered was nothing like the woman he met in the bank. She seemed to have blossomed. Suddenly, Eugenio felt a dreadful drowsiness. Turning to the wall, he instantly slipped into a troubled sleep. The test results and ultrasound were not very promising. Eugenio had to stay in the hospital for further examination. He also didn't feel well. Lowering his temperature was difficult, and he started experiencing pains, having to take painkillers twice a day. The man was close to depression. Staying in the hospital was so difficult for him. His parents and friends called him, but he didn't want to talk to anyone. One day, he received a message on his phone from an unknown number. "Eugenio, how are you? I'm really worried. You passed out right in my office. I was so scared. Please, write how you're feeling." The man didn't immediately understand who it was. His brain wasn't working properly. And then, the dazzling image flashed before him again, Katrina's slender silhouette against the window, hair gathered at the nape, beautifully outlined lips. He pushed away the image of the young woman and turned off his phone's display. He didn't want her to pity him. He didn't need anyone right now. With these gloomy thoughts, Eugenio slipped back into a heavy sleep. The next day, he woke up late. His head didn't hurt, and Eugenio felt a little better. The doctor came in, asked him the usual questions, and noted the man's answers. Valentin was about to leave when there was a knock on the door. The tall guy, whom Eugenio saw when he woke up after fainting, peeked into the room. "There's a visitor for Senor Cuero." "Doctor, may I let her in?" Senor Barua frowned for a moment, then nodded briefly. "Just briefly, please," he warned. Eugenie shifted uncomfortably under the covers. "But I'm not expecting anyone. And I haven't invited anyone," he muttered grimly. He felt his headache returning. "Bring me some painkillers, please," he asked the curly-haired guy. He nodded quickly and disappeared. Eugenie closed his eyes. Who could come to him? Why? No one should see him in such a state. He hadn't spoken to anyone except his attending physician and medical staff for a couple of weeks, even over the phone. He had sent a message to his parents, assuring them he was fine, so they would stop worrying. Eugenie heard someone enter the room again, but he didn't bother to open his eyes. He was irritated and didn't want to see anyone. He thought the nurse would leave the painkillers on the bedside table and leave, but that didn't happen. Suddenly, Eugenio felt someone sit cautiously on the edge of his bed. And he also sensed an almost forgotten scent from the outside world, the aroma of women's perfume. Eugenio abruptly opened his eyes and saw Katrina in front of him. She was staring intently at his face, and there was worry frozen in her eyes. "What are you doing here?" the man exclaimed sharply. The unexpected reaction caught the girl off guard for a moment. "I came to visit you," she whispered, her large gray eyes widening. Eugenio noticed that she had long, beautiful eyelashes, but he quickly dismissed that thought. "I didn't invite you," he cut her off. Katrina lowered her gaze and adjusted the gold watch on her wrist. "I thought you might be lonely," she said quietly. "And I brought you some chocolate pastries." "I don't need anything," Eugenio replied dryly. "And I'm not lonely at all. Should I leave?" Katrina, barely audible, casting a tearful look at the man. "Yes," he said firmly. "I want to be alone." Katrina slowly stood up and headed for the door. Eugenio watched her go. Today she was wearing a white knitted sweater and a mustard yellow skirt. It all suited her very well. The outfit gave her an airy and feminine look. Eugenio turned away. Katrina stood by the door for a while, holding onto the doorknob, hesitating to open it. Then she suddenly turned around and quickly crossed the room. "But I won't bother you," she exclaimed. "I just want to be here. I know you're seriously ill, but it doesn't matter. I won't pity you if you're afraid of it. I'll just sit here. Please don't push me away." But Eugenio didn't say anything in response. Katrina sniffled and quietly left the room. The man sighed. He knew it would be better this way for everyone. A week passed. Eugenio was still in the hospital. The pain didn't leave him. Katrina didn't come or write to him anymore. I probably offended her, the man bitterly thought, but he couldn't do anything about it. He still didn't want to let anyone close to him. He thought that maybe he would never be able to return to his old life. Then why give someone false hope? Why make his loved ones suffer? It's better for him to be alone. He's strong, he can handle it. One day, he fell asleep during the day and dreamed of Katrina. They were sitting again at their old school desk, but both were of their current age. Katrina was dressed in a tender turquoise dress, and she let her hair down. Eugenio lovingly looked at her, then reached out and carefully tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You've become very beautiful, Katrina," he whispered. The girl's cheeks blushed, and she leaned her head against his shoulder. "I've been waiting for you for so long, Eugenio," she whispered. Only now did the man notice the shiny necklace around her neck, adorned with a golden shell. Eugenio leaned in to get a closer look at her, and he began to feel dizzy. Katrina gently embraced him and held him close, and he felt himself becoming lighter. Eugenio woke up with a smile on his face. He reached for his phone and saw that Katrina had sent him a message. "I'm sorry, maybe I was too intrusive. I shouldn't have come," Eugenio read, then began to compose a reply. "It's me who should apologize. I was rude," he replied. "How are you?" Katrina wrote. "Same as before," Eugenio replied. Katrina remained silent for a long time. He had already turned off the phone screen and placed it on the bedside table when suddenly it beeped. Eugenio glanced at the display. "You know, I haven't written anything for a long time. But you inspired me. This story is for you, Eugenio," he read. An audio file was attached to the message. With trembling hands, Eugenio pressed the triangle button to play it. Soft music filled the room, followed by Katrina's voice. It was very soulful and pleasant. Katrina read aloud, and her words carried the man far away, to places he had only been in childhood. He closed his eyes and let the beautiful story captivate his imagination, allowing him to momentarily forget about the worries that had plagued him all this time. He only woke up when Katrina's voice faded away, and the music ended. The story calmed and comforted him. Eugenio pressed the play button again and listened to the tale once more. The man was deeply impressed by the story, pondering what Katrina could achieve with her talent. She said she hadn't written for a long time. Did she really give it up? This thought troubled the young man for a while. Then exhaustion took over, and he fell asleep. The next morning, he realized he hadn't replied to Katrina's message. He picked up the phone and thanked her. She reacted with a pink heart. Her favorite color, Eugenio suddenly remembered. "Why did you stop writing stories?" he typed. He hesitated for a minute, then pressed the send button. The reply came almost instantly. "No time. Had to work a lot," Katrina replied. "You have a gift," Eugenio typed. Katrina didn't respond for a long time. "I don't know what's wrong with me. Maybe I just grew up?" she finally wrote. Eugenio pondered for a while what to reply, then wrote, "You've become very beautiful, that's for sure." Katrina responded with a smiley face. "So, I used to be ugly?" she wrote a couple of seconds later. "I didn't say that," Eugenio replied. Katrina remained silent. Eugenio turned his head to the window. The sun was shining brightly behind him. How long had it been since he last went outside? He couldn't remember. Although he was allowed to stroll in the hospital courtyard, Eugenio didn't want to. A notification sounded, and the man glanced at the display. "I wanted to tell you that I'm leaving soon," Katrina wrote. "Where to?" Eugenio asked. "I'm being transferred to another branch." "I'll be living on the coast," the girl replied. Suddenly, Eugenio felt a pang of bitterness. He remembered where he was and felt irritation creeping over him. He wasn't sure if he would ever be able to see the sea again. The man wasn't sure about anything. The message notification distracted him from his dark thoughts. "I want to see you one last time before I leave," Katrina wrote. "No," Eugenio replied. Tossing the phone onto the bedside table, he closed his eyes and tried not to think about anything. However, Katrina's image kept appearing before his mind's eye. He recalled the seashell necklace the girl wore in his dream. Eugenio suddenly caught himself thinking that he would like to go with her. Start a new life in another city. He had always dreamed of living by the sea, but he thought leaving his parents wouldn't be right. Now he understood that these were just excuses. He could visit them or offer to move with them. Eugenio looked back bitterly. How much in life had he postponed for later or found thousands of reasons not to do something? How many times had he betrayed his dreams? Eugenio felt anger and even rage. He wanted to scream and pound his fists into the wall. Why had he always thought he would live forever? Weeks passed. All this time there were no messages from Katrina. Eugenio didn't write to her either. Perhaps she had already moved and was now building a new life. Sometimes Eugenio imagined her walking along the seashore, collecting seashells, admiring seagulls, and beautiful sunsets. Sometimes he saw her with another man who courted her, took her to cafes and cinemas. He tried as hard as he could to push away these images, but they kept coming back. His condition remained the same, and Eugenio began to lose hope. One day he allowed his parents to visit him, but it didn't end well. They saw that he was almost broken, and it was very hard for them to look at him. His mother couldn't hold back her tears. His father remained silent with a heavy heart. Eugenio would have liked to behave differently, but he couldn't change anything. One day, during the day, he received a message from Katrina. She sent her photo. In it, the girl was wearing a soft turquoise dress, just like in his old dream. She stood on the seashore not far from a cozy cafe. "Listen to your heart," the glowing letters on the sign said. Katrina looked beautiful and happy. Eugenio wanted more than ever to be by her side. He didn't reply, turning off the phone screen. For a while, he lay there, staring at the white hospital ceiling. Then he got up, threw on his jacket, and walked out into the corridor. Walking to the elevator, he descended and, for the first time in a long time, left the hospital building. Taking in the fresh air, Eugenio walked along the alley. He had become so accustomed to the sounds and smells of the outside world that they literally intoxicated him. Why did I resist for so long? When did I stop believing? Eugenio asked himself. He kept walking until he grew weary. Sitting down on a bench, he breathed deeply for a long while. Then he got up again and continued walking. Eugenio started going out into the courtyard every day. Then, with the doctor's permission, he began doing simple exercises in a specially designated room. I can do this, the man told himself. I will succeed. I will live by the sea. I will live. At the end of the week, follow-up tests were scheduled. The doctor, frankly, didn't expect anything good, but upon seeing the results, he was pleasantly surprised. Eugenio, you've done great, he said, entering the man's room on Friday morning. Really? Eugenio smiled, and his heart beat a little faster with joy. The tests have improved significantly. I have a feeling that you put effort into this. Am I right? I really want to get better, Eugenio admitted. That's the right attitude. I approve, said Valentino. Eugenio smiled again. And I will do it, I swear to you, doctor, he assured. I have no doubt. The disease can be beaten, I'm sure. And your desire to live will help with that 99%. Then I'm in the game. Eugenio replied enthusiastically. Wait for me, Katrina, wait, he thought to himself. Some more time passed. Eugenio was getting better every day. Dr. Valentino couldn't be happier with his progress. Finally, he said that Eugenio could leave the hospital. However, I can't say that the illness won't come back. You need to be vigilant and come for follow-up examinations every month. Eugenio nodded and warmly thanked Senor Barua for everything he had done for him. Then he went to his parents and told them he was going to the sea. His mother cried tears of happiness that Eugenio had finally left the hospital and was feeling much better. His father was also very happy. They blessed him on his journey, wishing him a good time, but asked him to be very careful and call or write to them every evening. Eugenio promised them that. The next morning, he packed his suitcase, boarded a train, and set off for the sea. He was very nervous, not knowing how to write to Katrina about it. Throughout the journey, he thought about the message but still didn't send it. He was very afraid that the girl was already seeing someone else and wouldn't want to see him. At the train station, he took out his phone from his pocket and wanted to dial Katrina's number, but again hesitated. Instead, he called a taxi and went to the studio he had booked online. The apartment owner was waiting for him. He showed him the studio and handed over the keys. Eugenio thanked the man and was left alone. From the window of the apartment, he could see the sea and a piece of the promenade. The young man decided to rest for a while and then go for a walk to have a snack and drink coffee. The day was drawing to a close. Couples strolled along the promenade. Every time, Eugenio flinched. Katrina seemed to appear everywhere, but then he convinced himself it wasn't her. He had been walking for half an hour when suddenly he noticed the same cafe that was in Katrina's photo. Listen to your heart, Eugenio read. He wanted to enter, but unexpectedly noticed a familiar turquoise dress. It was Katrina. She sat at one of the tables, writing something in a notebook. Probably working on a book, Eugenio thought. His heart sweetly tightened with anticipation of happiness. He took a step forward and reached for the handle of the entrance door, but then he saw a young man approach the girl. He had dark, smooth hair and tanned skin. He said something, and Katrina looked up. Upon seeing the young man, she smiled. He sat down at her table. Eugenio silently watched them converse. Then someone behind him asked if he had been inside. He shook his head and stepped aside. Katrina and the young man at her table were laughing cheerfully. Then she began reading something to him from her notebook. Eugenio turned and walked along the promenade. His heart was shattered. He cursed himself for not writing to Katrina for so long and not responding to her messages. He was very angry, but at the same time felt sorry for himself, which he didn't want to admit. This wasn't the meeting he had dreamed of all this time. How naive he had been. A beautiful girl like Katrina wouldn't wait so long. Especially after he pushed her away. What did he even hope for? He came home and, without undressing, threw himself on the bed. However, he couldn't fall asleep. It seemed to him that his headache was starting again, although he hadn't had any pain for over 2 weeks. Eugenio sat up in bed and listened to his feelings. Just what I needed. Please, not now. He thought to himself. He lay down again, and this time he slowly began to drift off to sleep. In the morning, when Eugenio woke up, he felt like having coffee. He cautiously got out of bed, listening to his own feelings. His head didn't hurt. There was a message from his mom on his phone. He replied to her, saying that everything was fine, took a shower, got dressed, and left the house. His feet carried him to the same cafe. Listen to your heart, Eugenio read once again and smiled. Now these words seemed like fate's mockery to him. Without looking around, he pushed the door open, entered, and met Katrina's gaze. She sat at a table, and the same notebook lay in front of her. The girl was alone. Eugenio froze in place. Katrina, too, didn't move, looking at him with wide eyes. "Can I help you?" the barista asked, surprised by the scene. "Cappuccino, please," Eugenio mechanically replied, not looking at him. His eyes were fixed on Katrina. "What are you doing here?" The girl finally found her voice. "Came to live by the sea," Eugenio replied. "Fulfilling an old dream." Katrina swallowed a lump in her throat. "I'm very glad you're healthy," she whispered. "I am too," Eugenio said. Katrina lowered her gaze and picked up the pen with trembling hands. "You're alone," the man murmured, approaching closer. The girl looked up at him again, tears in her eyes. "And who else should I be with?" she asked. "Yesterday you were here with a man," Eugenio bitterly remarked. Katrina opened her mouth in surprise. "You were here yesterday?" she asked. Eugenie just nodded. He pulled back a chair and sat opposite Katrina. "He was my editor. He's helping me with the book," Katrina simply replied. Eugenie didn't immediately believe her. "You're writing a book?" he asked. Katrina nodded and showed him the notebook. "Yes, for over a month now. I come here almost every day. Sometimes I write at home." "And what about work?" "I left the bank," Katrina admitted. "I'm a freelancer now, writing on commission. It covers all my needs, and I still have time for the book." Eugenie suddenly felt very good. "I'm so happy for you," he said sincerely. The girl smiled. "I thought you forgot about me," Katrina confessed. Eugenie shook his head. "No," he admitted. "I've been thinking only about you all this time. You were my inspiration when I desperately wanted to recover with all my soul. I came here for you." Katrina couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Is that true?" she whispered. Eugenie took her hand. "Absolutely true," he replied. "And I was so afraid I'd be late." Katrina smiled shyly. "No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't look at others. My heart always belonged to you." Eugenia's heart beat stronger with happiness. "Excuse me for interrupting, but your cappuccino is ready," the waiter said. Eugenie took the paper cup with the words "Listen to your heart" written on it and smiled at Katrina, who smiled back. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed the story, please support the video by liking it and leaving a comment. Thank you very much.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.